Finance and Budgeting Committee meeting for Thursday, October 17th will come to order. Clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
We have a quorum.
And has anybody signed in for public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
We have in your packet the minutes from the September 30th, 2019 meeting. Do I have a motion relative to those minutes?
So moved. Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from September 30th, 2019. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. Ayes have it and the minutes are approved. What we have in front of us are two items, a piece of legislation and a discussion item. But they're actually basically the same item because the resolution is the actual contract amendment with Infor, and the discussion item is the amendment to the 2018 to 19 biennial budget to pay for exactly the same thing. So I would like to have the clerk read both items, and we're going to hear both of them simultaneously.
Resolution number 2019-0227, authorizing an amendment to contract number CE 16000274-02 with Infor Public Sector for information technology services and solutions for the Enterprise Resource Planning System for the period 10/27/2016 to 10/26/2021 to exchange the scope of services effective 1/1/2019 and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $2,963,462. And we have item G from R 2019-0222, and this is for 40A069 capital projects. To the Office of Budget and Management, on behalf of the Information and Technology, is requesting an appropriation increase, $2,963,463 for change order number 33 in regard to the ERP.
Thank you very much. Everybody should note that the discussion item does not actually have to be voted upon. If we move the resolution out of committee and put it on the agenda for the full council, well then this item G in the appropriation will be put into the next fiscal agenda, which is coming up also at next Tuesday's council meeting. So with that, I would like to call Mr. Ryan forward, and Jack is going to give us specific information about this particular change order, and also kind of bring us up to date more broadly on the overall current status of the ERP project. So this will give us also an opportunity to do some general oversight. Mr. Ryan.
My life? Here we go. Good afternoon, or good morning, excuse me. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about where we are in the ERP project, and give you an update. Get the technology to work here. Just give you a general update on where we are in terms of project status, as well as just a summary of CO33 and where we are with that and our recommendation. Okay. So I'd like to talk about, first of all, project status, Infor 33, just a brief look at our program finances, and if the committee likes, we can take questions related to what we're calling Phase 2, and we'll make that distinction here in just a moment to be clear about what that is. So I'd like to start with just some program accomplishments here. We have really some significant things that have happened since I was in front of the committee last time. I've got on
Good, okay.
page 4, a list of those accomplishments that I just wanted to walk through with you. So one of the most critical things that we have is, it's been ongoing for some time, is what we call GHR Refresh, the human resources rework and addition of all the employee data required not only for human resources, but for open enrollment, for payroll, for workforce management, lots of downstream effects to that data. That's book of record for employee information. And I'm pleased to report that GHR Refresh went live this week. So we are in production with all of that data, and that prepares us for open enrollment. There was some risk involved. I think last time I briefed that we were struggling through data validation, and we've gotten through that process, and the data's there, the system is live, and open enrollment is on target for October the 21st with that new data, all the benefits information and employee data updated. So that's a significant accomplishment for the human resources team, and I have to give them kudos. There were several weekends, evenings, lots of team involvement, a super team effort on the part of the HR department and on the part of Infor and the technical teams as well. Okay. Next thing, I think you may have seen an email from Maggie Keenan, but I wanted to make sure I highlighted it here as well. OBM has created budget schedules, all from the new BFM system. And that's exciting. The system is not only in production, it's now being used to produce not only council documents, but other scheduled documents, and that use will continue to increase. So that's a kudo for that team and an exciting use of the new system for Go Live. The next piece of that is to sync it up closely with the Lawson flexible budgeting system, so that we have all the budgeting information that's in the general ledger accounting system, and the flex budgeting system that's associated with it on the Lawson side is pulled into BFM. That's a manual process. Chose to do it that way rather than have an automated interface. But it's a pretty straightforward process. It doesn't take long, and I think the closer that we synchronize those modules, the more real time the information becomes in BFM. So that's underway, and the process for defining that, or not defining that, process for doing that is being worked by both teams. We've also completed both the treasury management, procurement, and accounts payable user acceptance test. I think the last time I was here, we had major issues with treasury management that stalled on, and those have been overcome. And so all of the UATs, those are all 3 of the critical UATs that we need for the next bundle, to use Zig's term, I think, of go lives for fiscal, have been completed. So that's an exciting development as well. The learning management system, which is tied to HR, is scheduled to go live on October the 28th. We deferred the go live on that until we got through GHR Refresh and prepared for open enrollment, which were the highest priorities for the area. So that's currently scheduled for October the 28th. Not expected to have any issues with that.
Some documents are saying November 4th for that. Which is it?
You know what? November 4th is the correct date. I'm sorry, we pushed it an additional week. I had the wrong date in here. Sorry. But we did push it out just because we had open enrollment, and GHR Refresh is the highest priorities here. So we purposely slipped it out there. Thank you. We've, for the February set of go-lives for fiscal, all that go-live checklist planning that we had in process before has been completed, and the team is working that list diligently. We've got the forms printing. I think I've referred to this as MHC, which happens to be the company that provides the service of procurement forms and accounts payable forms and a number of other document-related services for us. Those interfaces have been completed, and we have really got those things almost production ready at this point. So the UAT, user acceptance testing for that, has been completed, and they're really parked and ready to be implemented in production. Revenue receipts designs for non-executive agencies have been completed, and we've started the design for accounts receivable, grants, and billing, which is part of the implementations that take place in 2020, and we'll see on a schedule here in a minute. We've also started the process for designing strategic sourcing and contract management. I think that's, we'll talk a little bit more about that and the schedule here in a minute. So that's been initiated. And one of the things that had been a concern of mine and others for a long time in terms of change management communications, just getting the process moving of communicating to both executive and non-executive agencies, departments, and stakeholders for ERP. That process is well underway with regular communications being executed really on a weekly basis, in some cases bi-weekly with different groups and through multiple media at this point. Role mapping and communication of users, that had also been something that we'd reported on as something we'd held up on until we had a clear definition of schedule. Is well underway. We've got specific information back on the 500 plus users for the next go live, about 50% of the agencies reporting in at this point, expecting to complete that over the next couple of weeks in terms of having clearly identified who those 500 users are and what their roles are. That's the critical to the next steps, which are actually training the users and beginning to get them set up in the system. Certainly last but not least, staff augmentation. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we've, through the inaction of the Executive Steering Committee, have worked through getting some additional help for fiscal and IT, in this case from HHS, who has volunteered some assistance, and we brought people over on a temporary basis from now through the end of the ERP project to supplement the fiscal team and the IT team with specific skills that we need to fill some vacancies that have been difficult to fill externally in any other way. So that's the list of accomplishments, at least the highlights.
You skipped over the November 4th IST on payroll. That, I think that's a kind of a big item. Tell us
It
about
is.
that.
I'm sorry if I did that. So yeah, we are right now preparing for that IST. All the preparation activities and planning activities are going on. I think we've got a lot of work to do to pull that off, but that's currently staying on the calendar on that date.
And what's the status of getting the problems with the agenda manager resolved?
Yes, sir. We've had some significant challenges just with Highland and OnBase and Northwood, just trying to get that together. Bottom line is, as recent as last night, we just telling council staff that before I came to the podium here, we have all of the documentation that we need to get this in front of Board of Control again, and we'll be putting that package, to answer all council's questions. The significant outstanding question that we had that I was pressing for was that do we need to pay for the coverage period legally? And contractually, do we need to pay for the coverage period from the beginning of the year all the way through when we've restarted the contract? The answer to that is yes, and we have all the backup documentation. I personally have had conversations with lawyers in both companies, and while we thought we might have made a case for not paying for a quarter's worth of that money, in order to restart the contract, we are going to have to cover the entire cost from the beginning of the year all the way through when we restart the contract with them. So it's a continuous coverage clause that is not unusual for software contracts, but we needed to legally back that up, and we've had both the legal teams from both Highland and Northwoods look at this, as well as our own legal team. And I'll be putting the package together today and getting it out. Just got the last of the information last night. Okay.
And on that, have we resolved the issue that we're not going to have to pay two different contractors for coverage at the same time frame?
Yes, sir. We have a letter to that effect that certifies that that's and signed legally that says that we're not going to have to do that.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And what go live events and testing starting events are scheduled for November and December?
I don't have a list of those here, but I'll be happy to provide that, and it'll be in the. I'll make sure that makes it into the next monthly or weekly report. So.
Councilwoman Brown.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. So I appreciate the update, Mr. Ryan, first and foremost, but I'm curious about Mr. Dennis Kennedy's departure and how it could impact the time frame. Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. Well, I think anytime we lose, and I've got a slide that talks about sort of the reasons for delay and why we had to do the change order in the first place, but anytime we lose somebody in a significant position like that, there's going to be an impact. Just the fiscal staffing in general. The item number 15 I had on the accomplishments list there with getting additional help to fiscal just in general, I think is significant. It doesn't cover everything for them, but it covers some things. The fact that we have a interim CFO already appointed and already actively working, I think is going to help fill the gap. So I would not expect a huge impact at this point for us from Mr. Kennedy's departure. Okay.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Tron.
Yes, sir.
Yes. You've got 15 accomplishments listed here. Would Zig agree, if we had him up here, that these are 15 major accomplishments?
I believe he would.
Okay.
I can't speak for Zig, but
No,
I would hope he would.
wasn't asking you to. And would he then say they have actually been completed on his scale of completion?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I believe he would.
Payroll is now going live when? You've got a number of HR issues
Yeah.
that you say have been accomplished.
4-1.
No, I'm
For-
asking him, not you, Dick.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, sir. No, it's on the calendar for 4/1. Everything, and we'll talk about. I'll get.
Is
to the
it
next
going
slide.
live on 4/1?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
On
Councilman
4-2,
Gallagher.
if it doesn't go live, do you have a job?
If it doesn't go live, do I have a job? I don't know how to answer that question.
Are you putting your word and the faith in your prediction on your position?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure if you covered this, but I don't see the words. The bank rec, has that been resolved? The issues that we thought were resolved, and then we had a
Yes.
problem, and then is it now on course and ready to go?
It is, and I didn't use that terminology. It's part of Treasury Management, which is
Okay.
one of those three UAT completions that we had up there on item 5. Yes, ma'am.
So that
has been
incorporates the
resolved.
bank. Great.
That
Thank
has
you.
been
It's
resolved.
Good to know.
Yeah, that was one of the significant things that we were able to get through. Okay. All right, moving.
Any other? Please proceed.
Okay. The other, the next slide, slide 5, just some key decisions that executive management has made that just to keep us focused, I think, more than anything else here. these things are the kinds of things that have been worked through with the Executive Steering Committee, which is now very active, and who I respond to, and is chaired by Bill Mason, the Chief of Staff. Any estimates beyond the end of 2020 are just, at this point, we're not going to be able to provide. It's not that we'll never provide them, it's just that right now the team is totally focused on getting all the things done that need to happen between now and the end of 2020. So we've estimated, we have costs for phase 1 and phase 2. Anything beyond that at this point is pretty speculative. There's some, so we won't be providing any detailed estimates related to what might happen in those terms. Okay. I think the other thing is that there's a stake in the ground. I think that's the right term to use here. That just says that all of the core fiscal and human resources functionality will be completed, and back to this question, by the 1st of April. Okay. Non-core activities from the originally defined solution they'll be completed by the end of 2020. So the entire scope as originally defined under the contract would be completed by the end of 2020.
Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Councilman Miller. I just want to circle back to the reconciliation write-off.
Yes.
Because that has to come before council. Do you have a time frame when you expect us to receive that? Because that'll affect the go live, if I'm not mistaken.
I can't speak for this fiscal team on when they're going to have the item before council on the actual reconciliation. Well, I was speaking to the process in ERP. I'll have to let them respond directly on what in terms of the actual reconciliation of the books.
Okay, so because that's going to affect your time.
It won't affect our timing. We'll still go live with the new process. So the fact that they're still reconciling the actual numbers or where they're at in that process will not affect the timing for our actual go live with the new software.
Okay, because we have to approve the write-off. Is that not correct?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Right. So those are they go down two separate timing tracks here. So.
That'll probably be in the form of a budget amendment.
Okay.
Councilman Trot.
Just real quick, we've got a statement here that says the primary core fiscal and human resources functions will be completed by April 1st. Can you go back? I know that some of these were not promises made by you, but can you go back from the beginning of this project and give us every single time that promise has been made and what dates the deliveries were supposed to be on the HR? Not right now, you don't have to do it right this moment.
Sure.
But I want to see it in writing, every single promise, because we've got them, but I want to make sure that you folks at least acknowledge that those promises have been made before.
Yes, sir. If we can do the research on that, I'm sure we have that. I just don't have
I'm
it
sure
here.
you do, but if you don't, we'll have our folks make sure that it goes publicly on the record, because
Okay.
We are very concerned about that April 2nd date.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, Councilman Gallagher.
And also with that, if our staff could find out every single time people in this committee asked for the truth to be told to them on the record, and that trust was broken.
Ms. Baker.
I just want to, I think it's appropriate to ask, because you're on the third check here, the 2.9 million that's being asked for phase 1 includes all the primary core functions that was initially in the contract, am I right?
No,
Okay.
that wouldn't be correct. Let me move to, if I could move to the next slide. Okay, so this, in terms of the way we're talking about this, I want to make sure that I'm clear on this as well. The things that are part of phase 1 include everything except those items that we talked about in previous discussions that are deferred. Okay.
Okay.
So everything in phase 1 is under CO 33, and that's part of the 2.9 million. The items that are not part of the 2.9 million that we're talking about today would be those items on the right-hand side of the slide here for phase 2 that are going to be completed by the end of 2020. So the original contract items that I believe you're referring to would all be completed by the end of 2020. And that's we have a whole discussion on phase 2 that we can go through a little bit later in this presentation if the committee would like. Okay.
Like, follow up?
Please proceed.
So I'm trying to recall other meetings that we've had prior. The 2.96 that is being asked to take us to 4/1/2020, that will complete, at least at the time I thought we talked about that, completed all the core projects. And what we deferred or took out of the project equal to about 700 to 800,000.
Yeah, I have those
790,
numbers a little further
772.
down in the contract.
Okay,
but
those are phase 2, aren't they? Isn't phase 2?
those are phase 2, yes.
Okay, so it
Yes, ma'am.
shouldn't, in theory, if all the core projects, if all the core responsibilities are now extended to April 1st for 2.9 million, and what's left that we deferred is the 790,000, why would there be anything else due? And I guess you're going to get into that. But I thought that everything outside of the core were things that were reporting, testing, things that we really couldn't do anyway because we needed to complete the core projects first, and that we could even use some of our own employees who were not as stretched for time anymore because this core project's done, and that we would also save even on the almost 800,000 that's been deferred. Is that still a reality, or are we now beyond all of that and phase 2 became bigger than what was originally de-scoped?
Well, I think I guess what I'd like to do is defer the conversation on phase 2. I can either go there and talk specifically about it, or we could get through.
I can wait.
Okay, I will come back to that. If I do not, please.
Just for clarification, though, the ending of phase 1 of April 1st there is still some core issues that need to be taking place in phase 2. That is not.
There are core the items over there in phase 2 on the chart.
Yes.
Which those talent management, which has 6 functions. Expense management and total rewards. Those 3 things were considered less important, if I can use that term.
Good.
We can go live. We can go live with financials without those things.
Right.
We could implement those without financials. We don't have a system. So from that standpoint, they're non-core,
Got it.
and I think that may be confusing terminology, and I apologize for that. So.
Okay.
But to complete the contract items that originally were contracted for Infor, we have to finish phase 2 to finish out those items. But we pulled them out of scope
Right.
so that we can have the team focus on the what we consider to be truly core things, which are those things in the middle of that slide.
And that pulling out equal to the 790,000.
That was the yes,
Okay,
yes, ma'am.
all right.
Okay,
Thank you. Thanks.
sure.
I'll wait till you get to your presentation.
So,
Other
on this
questions?
slide, why are there not dates listed for business intelligence and for data lake?
Probably an oversight. We're implementing business intelligence pieces throughout the process here, and so I didn't have a specific end date. If I was going to put an end date out there, we'll be doing something with that all the way through 2020. So I didn't have a specific target date. It's not a single item. It's a series of things that we're doing to increase our reporting capability over that period of time. Okay. Apologize for that.
So, those 2 items might not be completed by 4/1, is that correct?
The items that I guess the short answer is yes, you're correct. That we will not be done with all business intelligence reporting by 4/1. That process will continue through 2020. Yes, sir.
Okay, continue.
Okay. So this chart just depicts graphically, it's one that you saw before, and I just wanted to point out three things. I think we've kind of already covered this, but first thing is that with the one red item that we have here is the Northwoods Highland contract issue that we've already discussed. Also, the items that...
Do we expect that item before Border Control this coming Monday?
I don't know that, I'm going to have the package put together today. Rather, there's sufficient time for council staff to review between now and Monday. I'm not sure. So the worst case scenario would be the following week, but the package will be in council staff's hands today.
Okay.
Okay. So the other item is that just the change management items that I had in red or near red status before, I think we're now moving forward with. So we're executing a change management plan. And the last thing here was just to identify the fact that we have we're moving forward with strategic sourcing and contract management, as I reported earlier in the accomplishments. But I will point out that we've got staff working for procurement and part of the technical staff working on both the phase one of procurement and then the contract management and strategic sourcing simultaneously. So there's some risk involved there, but we are moving on that. We were not moving before. Okay. Just in terms of overall project planning, I would point out here that, and in the next couple of slides, I'm not going to focus in detail on these, but we have taken, because we now are dividing the project into phase one and phase two, this slide represents phase one programs. The percentages percent complete calculations are based on the total number of tasks. So we've pulled out the phase two task into a separate plan. We didn't lose them. We've just pulled them into a separate plan because we want to focus on phase one. So the percentages increased. It maybe made a difference of, 3% or something like that overall. And you'll see that through the planning process. We've also, in terms of simplifying what we're looking at in terms of goals, you'll see, we've got a bundle 1, 2, and 3. I stole Zig's terminology for bundles because I like it as well, for October, February, and April. So that's how we have the go-live activities divided up just for simple targets. Okay. On the next slide, just the graphical timeline, again, represents the information. I'm not going to focus on the details of this too much here, but just provided for your review. And then top 7 challenges here on the next slide. I mentioned, and I'll emphasize again, the fact that we're running parallel strategic sourcing, contract management, and core procurement implementations simultaneously with the same OPD staff. And so we're constantly working to see what we can do to get through that process. The fiscal personnel shortage, I've already highlighted that as well, but we've augmented the staff. But I think we still have some fairly high risk here in terms of accounts receivable and grants management implementations. Among other things, I think they're just, we'll see what the impact of the 4 people that we're adding to fiscal is in an attempt to try to assist them. And it may take some additional staff augmentation that we'll continue to look at with the fiscal staff and the new CFO or interim CFO. Back to the question about the CFO's departure, it does add some additional workload for fiscal staff, but that was one of the reasons we've also looking for staff augmentation. The question is, do we need to do some more of that? And I think that the answer that I'm giving is probably, okay? Well, working to try to make sure that we minimize the impact of that. Payroll IST preparation is underway. I'd already mentioned that. There's some risk involved there. There's a lot of work to be done between now and November the 4th to get that ready, but that work is underway. We have lost 2 key consulting resources that we're in the process of interviewing and replacing, one in procurement and one in workforce management, just for personal reasons. Things happen with people and their lives. So we have candidates identified. We are interviewing them. Hopefully get those positions refilled. Northwood's contract, I've already commented on, and I think probably the biggest single thing on the bottom here is just in general team morale. I think we're pressing people real hard on schedules because we do have a stake in the ground on 4-1, clearly identified by the Chief of Staff and the ESC. And so it is a pressurized environment right now, and we need to work real hard to not only augment the staff, but I think making sure that we're really closely focused on scope control as well, that we don't add any nice to haves into the scope at this point, so that we get our core systems up. Because once we get the core systems up, then that's the framework on which the county can build other beneficial activities and processes.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chair?
For the record, Ms. Simon has joined the meeting, and Councilman Tuma.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick question with respect to team morale. I mean, it's not like you guys haven't had a long time to try to get this project done. I don't understand why the morale would be low. And then, I mean, April 1st is your deadline. I mean, that's a substantial amount of time to get. What's the pressure? I mean, honestly, I don't understand why morale would be low. You would think it would be high, seeing that there's an end date in sight.
Well, I think the good news is there's an end date in sight. The challenging news is there's a lot of work to be done, and these folks, to their credit, in every department are working not only ERP but their full-time jobs. Okay, so that's a reason for staff augmentation. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that these folks are working real hard and doing 2 things at once here.
I know the feeling.
Okay.
I would have to say, so who do these people report to? You?
No, I'm talking about departmental staff. I'm not talking about
Departmental
ERP staff. I'm talking about the actual departmental staff in every area. Fiscal staff reporting to the CFO, HR staff reporting to head of HR and so forth. It's not just the ERP team. We don't have in those cases, we got to recognize the fact we don't have an ERP team dedicated to only ERP in terms of county staff. What we have is people that are doing at least double, in some cases triple duty, to get this live. And so I want to make sure we recognize that effort and recognize the impact of that. Doesn't mean you can't work on it in a lot of different ways. There's activities that we can do to work on it. I just want to identify that as a factor and a risk, and make sure that they get credit for what they're doing as well.
Okay, understood. All right.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
Councilman Gallagher.
Now that we know people are working double and triple, are they being recognized? Are they being recognized financially?
Well, I don't control the financial side of that, so I'm not, in each individual case I think is being dealt with. I can't answer that on an individual basis here.
Well, do you know of anybody that's getting paid for extra work?
I don't control the payroll for this.
I didn't ask that. I said, do you know of anyone that's getting more pay for the double and triple work?
I don't have a specific knowledge of anybody that I could call out.
Would you suggest maybe that would be fair if people are doing not only their daily work, but ERP work, double and triple, as you stated?
Again, that's the call. I think that's the chief of staff's call and the departmental call in each area. I'm not suggesting it's not fair. I'm just suggesting it's not my call.
So you would suggest that it would be fair?
I would agree that it would be fair in several cases.
That
Okay.
may go, and I don't know, to why the team morale is below 0 in this county.
Yeah. Okay.
Councilwoman
Just to
Baker.
follow up then, as of April 1st, when the core is done and now we are hopefully enjoying the fruits of our labor, we will then see a diminished amount of work that will be needed because we have new deadlines, some of them not even until the end of the year, which is 8-9 months away. Would you say that at that point, we've been successful and morale is probably going to be better and the workload will lessen? Is that fair to say?
That would certainly be the hope at that point, once we get that live and get it stabilized. I don't know if I would say April 1st, because we're going to go through a stabilization period of about 60 days there, but I think it will, certainly the workload will back off once the system is stable and
Goes live.
and settled.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, continue.
Okay. So the details of change order 33 is next up on slide 12 here. This is a slide you've seen before, and I just wanted to, the reasons didn't change when we started down the path of extending change order 33 here. We, as recognized earlier, today we had a significant issue with the 5-year audit finding, doing what we needed to do in additional testing that was not part of the original scope to make sure that we had cash reconciliation, bank reconciliation tools in place, working the way we needed them to work. So thankfully that process has been completed at this point, but that was a significant factor. GHR refresh and getting employee data in place so that the HR system could become the employee system of record was a huge factor. It took a lot of effort, and thankfully that one has been completed. And then the third factor that we're still talking about is the staff impact. When you look at least 17 rotations that I'm aware of, there's probably some before I got here that everybody would point out, that just has an incredible impact on schedules, on people's ability to work, on morale, on a lot of things. So again, with the ESC, the Executive Steering Committee, in play here in a real positive way, they're actually functioning very well here. One of their first actions here is to get some additional staff implementation by just coordinating between agencies to get help where it's needed in some areas here. There's probably some more of that that needs to happen, but those are the factors that really got us where we are today. Okay.
Yes.
So on the 17 key ERP people, that list has been there now for a while. Have we reduced that 17 down?
We have, well, in terms of reducing it, I mean, the rotations are what they are. In terms of, if your question is, have we replaced some of those positions, the answer is we replaced some of those positions, certainly. And that was part of getting some additional help into fiscal here just recently. Those people just landed on site here in the last 2 weeks. In the case of IT, the 5 people to augment IT were landed yesterday. So we have yet to see the impact of that, and then we'll be looking at some other additional augmentation as well, wherever we can pull from the county to get expertise that's out there that we can pull in to make sure that we make this a successful effort.
I think it would be helpful, and I know this is ongoing, but maybe eliminate some of those that perhaps we have hired for so that we can see that progress has been made in trying to fill the gap in the people that we noted have been a loss. Is that possible?
Sure, we can provide a matrix maybe that just displays the position, who filled it,
Where we're at today?
where we're at with it, status. Sure, we can provide more detail on that. They just didn't do it here.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. In terms of the process we went through, I'm not going to belabor this because I think it's a slide you'd seen before, but this is the process we worked through with Infor, just to get to the point where we have a final agreed upon price for CO33. The actual numbers for CO33, in terms of the contract impact, are on this slide. You can see how we got to that number. We started with a high point of 4.3, did negotiations, did the deferral of some items, and arrived at the $2.9 million item. That takes the total contract value to $15,245,367. Okay, and just some notes on the side explaining, part of the negotiations and how it compares with what I originally briefed, which was, I think the original estimate that we had for this phase at least was 3.7 million. This particular change order is now $1.4 million less than that, although we do have, certainly acknowledging the fact we do have the deferred items of $791,000 that we still have to deal with. So, but just to kind of frame it in perspective with what was briefed before.
Okay, now I think it's appropriate to ask the question, if you would, Chair Nate. So, going to page 6, I'm sorry, slide 6 on page 3, that it says Phase 2 2020 deferred items. And seeing your line item less deferred Phase 2 items of 791,538, are they equal? Does the deferred Phase 2 items of 791 cover the Phase 2 that's listed on slide 6?
No, ma'am. Let me just, I'll get there.
Okay.
I will get there.
Sorry, I thought we were.
Okay, let me just, we're almost there, so
All
we
right.
can talk about that. So, let me cover Phase 2 and the cost in a separate item here. Just in terms of the overall program budget, this is a slide that you had seen before, but it's with the latest updates. These next two slides just show the change impact of all the different things that go into not only the Infor contract, but all related contracts, okay? So this includes a 20% contingency for that contract. And the net out of all of this is a net increase in terms of the appropriation of $6.9 million.
Okay. I'd like to break in for a minute and answer a question that Ms. Baker had asked me before the meeting. And the question that she asked is whether the $2.963 million for this change order includes a 20% contingency. And the answer, and you can tell me, you can confirm, but the answer is that the change order itself does not contain a contingency. However, the contingency is added as a separate item on this overall chart on the financial impact, meaning that in getting to the estimate of $31,957,000 for the total project cost, that includes a contingency of $592,000 on this change order, and if we were in fact able to complete this work without using that contingency, well then we could bring in the total cost at less than the $31,957,000. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions on this chart?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the current budget, as of the end of September, or as of 10/4 here, is shown. Obviously, the bottom line numbers are the projected bottom line numbers are the same as the previous impact slide. This just details it out in the normal format that we've briefed the budget before. Okay.
So I understood what you just said in the previous slide, but then on this slide, we have a 2.963 plus a 20% contingency. So we are saying, at least here, that shouldn't the ask be greater than 2.9?
Well, for the approval of the contract, the $2.9 million is, I think, appropriately presented. In terms of the a total appropriation, there's other contracts, other factors that cause that total number to be $6.9 million.
Okay,
So,
I see that.
As far as appropriations are concerned, we're only appropriating for the change order contract at this time, as shown in item G, which has the number that exactly matches.
right.
Got it, thank you.
If we need we are going to need some additional because there's work outside of Infor that's, but whether we need that $592,000 contingency is going to remain to be seen.
Right. So mine, yes, sir. Agreed. Okay.
Okay.
So that's all the information related to CO33 and this appropriation. The rest of the slides that I have in the brief are related to Phase 2, I think, which is where some of your questions are, Ms. Baker.
Well, Ms. Baker has raised that question, so let's do. Well, I'm going to ask if anyone has any more questions specifically about change order 33 at this time. You can always come back to them later, but then we're gonna. It's enough interest. We're gonna hear the presentation on change order on Phase 2. Councilman Schott.
Just a question on the 25 million that's showing at the bottom of the first column on the previous slide. Does that have any operational costs in regards to it, in that number when it was originally presented?
Well, when it was originally presented,
Which is, I assume, what we're showing on this slide.
I think I believe the answer to that's no. I wasn't here when it was originally presented, but when it was originally presented by myself, operational costs are reflected separately. So,
Okay, so there's nothing in the 25 that's 100% going live costs, as opposed to there's no operational costs in the 25.
should not be, no, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Baker.
We leave and get into Phase 2. Are you going to be showing us in Phase 2 what core pieces are not included in Phase 1 that causes Phase 2 to cost us more?
I hope so. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll move on. All right, related to Phase 2 and how we approached Phase 2. I think these are the key decisions that, just because they've been topics that have come up in different discussions before, if nothing else for clarity, I wanted to make sure we covered these things. Phase 2, at this point in time, does not cover any version upgrade for Infor. You know, that version upgrade, you've heard discussion about version 11, which may or may not be the version upgrade that we take. Looking out at the end, by the time we get to the end of 2020 or the beginning of 2021, I'm not sure where Infor's solution map is going to be and what upgrade we might want to take at that point in time. So that really requires a whole separate study, a little closer to the time frame when we'd actually do that. So that's not a consideration here. Next item is just burst, which is.
Excuse me,
I'm
before we get off
sorry.
that point,
Yes, sir.
if 2021 is when that upgrade is going to be considered, what's the possibility or the likelihood we are actually doing activity right this moment that'll be obsoleted before we ever even finish or barely finish the project?
Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that version 11 and future updates, we're already doing some things that we know would have to be reworked in that. That's probably true in any version upgrade for any piece of software.
I get that, but when this upgrade has it already been released?
Version 11 is out there.
Right.
Yeah.
So we already know what's in version 11.
We
We just have chosen to defer, to kick the can down the road till 21 as far as these things. So we're doing stuff knowing full well we're working on what is theoretically an older product.
Well, I got to be careful about stuff in this case. We're doing some things that we know would change. Okay, version 11 is a cloud-based version of the financials. We've got a single-tenant version of that we're running now. So we know that there's some things that would have to be reworked, not everything. And the other part of that is just to be, I didn't come prepared with the right slides for this, but some of the things we're doing are, for example, in GHR. In cash and treasury management, some of those things are already going to be cloud-based and will not have to be upgraded. So it's not everything that would have to be reworked. I want to be very careful about how we say that. That's why it's not that we'll probably start looking at that sooner than 2021, but that's why that requires some pretty careful study. I don't want to give you an long-winded answer here, but I think your question was, are we doing stuff now that potentially would have to be reworked? Yeah, we are. We know with conscious decision.
You added the word potentially, but your previous sentences were probably that you're actually doing work. So potentially means maybe it might be anticipated. You know full well we're doing work.
Oh, I know full well in some cases that we're doing
Right.
that. Didn't
Thank
mean to
you.
mislead you there. Okay. Right.
Also, for clarification, going back, on the estimating and planning decisions, that first bullet on page 3, slide 5, it says estimates for any potential ERP expansion or extension beyond the end of 2020 are not provided. Is that version 11 you're referring to?
That would be version 11 and anything related to that.
Anything related, not anything to
Yeah.
do with phase 1 or 2?
Correct.
Okay, so that's where you really could have said any estimates for any version 11 or potential changes. That's what you're referring to here for the
That is what I'm referring
2021.
to. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just so I'm clear, thanks.
Right. The next piece is Burst and data analytics implementations. Burst is Infor's data analytics and reporting package, and really we're not ready for the implementation of Burst at this point in time. We need to get our core system up first, and then we need to really look at how Burst and data analytics will be used across the county. I think there is an effort going on by the county to do data lake. I think that terminology has been used in here before, and we haven't bought a data lakes product as such yet. There's a lot of investigation that's gone on there. We know that we have to archive a whole bunch of data that where ERP is obsolescing systems. So what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at exactly how we integrate the archive data and the whole data lake concept with Burst and data analytics, but we're not going to take the team off task to do that right now. Okay, we're well aware that those are problems that need to be addressed. Okay, and last but certainly not least, I think there's some non-executive agencies that have obsolescing systems out there, and that there's probably some hope that we would be able to replace some of those at some point in time. We'll have the framework to be able to do that at some point in time, but we can't take the team off of task or off of focus to start looking too hard at that right now. We've really got to get the core in before we could do anything for anybody else outside our core systems at this point. Okay?
May I ask, before we leave this slide, are any of these or all of these, would that have been considered in the original contract? Would these have been where we have to include the burst and the non-executive agency system replace? I mean, are these things that are above and beyond what we consider to be part of the project at the beginning of the $25 million or $21 million project?
I honestly, since I wasn't here for that, I'm not sure specifically whether they were or weren't considered at that point. Burst was, I think, in its infancy at that point, if it was there at all. For example, in the case of Burst, it's not that we're not looking at this at all, either just to give you a little further context here. We have a copy of Burst, at least its pre-release version right now. What we haven't done is taken a lot of time to focus anybody on the team to look at that in depth, to try to put a plan together on what we're going to do that far in the future. We will continue to look at it. We'll continue to stay current, as we should, as a customer of Infor products, on what they're doing. It's just a matter of where we're going to focus our team design efforts at this point.
And that, of course, would not be focused by April 1st, but from April 1st to December 31st, 2020, is that where these will be?
I think we'll start after that. Yeah, after we get past April 1st, then that's the time when we should start looking at this a little closer to determine exactly what our strategy is going to be. So,
Okay,
okay,
all right.
all right. So looking at, I think this was an ask from previous discussion of based on the deferred modules. What was the original target date? So I just provided that. Don't know if there's any questions on this slide, but and then based on the deferred target, the original target date versus the target dates, at least the target months that we have in 2020 right now. Again, we haven't put, these are estimates that we're about to look at here from a financial standpoint. We haven't put detailed planning behind that at this point, so it's our best estimate at this point in time.
So if I may ask, so Phase 2 schedule are the deferred items that came from Phase 1, that we would have included in Phase 1, but because of time and focus of trying to complete the core items by April 1st, it was a decision that was made that these particular pieces that would be deferred or descoped to pay Phase 2. So am I appropriate in asking this question now that in the deferred items of 790,772, are these items that are taken out of Phase 1, put into Phase 2, we lowered that amount by 790,000 because we're not doing those in Phase 1 anymore. Is that the price tag for these items?
Well, and I'd just like to go to the next slide to answer your
Okay.
question. Okay. So
Sorry.
I'm really not trying to avoid the question. I'm
That's
trying
okay.
to answer it appropriately here.
Okay, well, I see you have an estimated cost summary of 2.2 million, that's why I'm asking that now.
Correct. So what we did was we took a look at the items for Phase 2.
Okay,
We did an analysis of what the costs were, and
Let's kind of cut to the chase here.
okay.
The question that's being asked is, why did we take out $790,000 worth of scope, and when we move those items into Phase 2, those same items cost $2.216 million?
thank you. That is really the crux of my question.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you.
Well, I guess the specific items for Infor, when we pulled those items out, okay, we had a price tag of $790,000. That would be our maximum Infor implementation cost for that. The $790,000 did not include our cost for those things, county staff, all those things that it would take on our side to get that done. So if you look at contractor, even in the summary slide on page 22, if you look at the contractor price and the internal price, our internal prices, are at least equal to or higher than those contractor prices. Now, there's other things that we want to do that don't involve Infor as part of Phase 2. We're talking about things, again, from the list of things that we want to accomplish in Phase 2, GL all agency, HR all agency, and some additional EAM interfaces. So some of those things we would be doing on our own. So there's an internal cost associated with those things for internal staff, which is the bulk of the work, actually.
So,
yes, sir.
is what's in phase two exactly the same as, or is it somewhat larger than what was de-scoped out of phase one?
I would say somewhat larger because it includes other things that we're doing with county staff to extend ERP functionality.
So that would be part of the reason why it's more than just 790,000.
Yes, sir.
But probably the larger reason is that the 790,000 from phase one was only the Infor cost.
Was only the Infor cost.
And that there's also the county staff costs and the main sale costs and such things. And in phase one, we need those people expending that same effort that we thought was going to do the whole shebang to do just the core so that they can get it done on April 1.
Yes, sir.
And so then we're going to need additional county staff time plus other non-Infor contract costs in order to get done what we have planned for phase two. Is that a...
That is correct. And when we get to the question that you'd asked, Ms. Baker, several times here, was, what about cost reductions and where can we get them? And we've got a couple of things that speak to that going forward here. So we have, first of all, I got to preface this whole section by saying we haven't sat down and tried to negotiate other contracts, other vehicles for getting that work done. So it's a little preliminary, and these are estimates. Okay, so we know that we won't have a cost on the Infor side, or at least the consulting side. We should not have a cost higher than the $790,000 that was taken out and deferred. So as stakes in the ground go, we understand that. Okay.
The 7.9 million that were asked to increase in order to get all the core done and be postponed till April 1st is not the end all. We didn't take it another 3 months to finish the core project and then de-scope because we wanted to stay focused in order to get to the core project finish date of 4/1. That is really not what we're talking about anymore. We're not talking about taking the 790,000 we thought at the time when this was asked of us to increase and also delay. Now we're being asked for the 790, and which at the time I remember conversations saying that 790 will probably be less because we're off the core duties. We're not doing 2 and 3 times the amount of work that we are now, and that the team can start focusing, the same team that we have now, that same county team can now be working on things that they haven't had the opportunity to work on before. So that the work is diminishing for them. It's not the intense work of getting the core done. We have now deadlines of September and even the end of December to get this done. And I just guess I'm a little disappointed that allowing this 2.9 million increase and going to April 1st is not an end. It's a finish, hopefully, to the core, which I'm not even sure we're finishing the core from what we're talking about here today. But it is a finish to the core that we are actually adding another almost equal to this, 2.2 million, in order to get us past April 1st, that we're doing things that we should have done in phase one that we no longer can. I mean, I know you can explain why it's costing us more, but I'm disappointed that if we would have gotten this done by the end of this year, the price tag would have been, 32 million. Every time we delay, it costs us more. And even if we just scope and defer, it costs us more. It doesn't just cost us more because of what Infor is charging us. It costs us more because of all the other costs that are associated with that. And I don't think we talked about that at the time that we said, if you give us the 2.9 million, we'll get the 800,000 at the end of April to the end of the year in 2020, and we'll have this job done.
No, we did not talk about the county costs associated with that at the time. You're correct.
But we did say the county costs would be less than anticipated, and the team would have less work to do because they're off the core. Everything is running, it's efficient. We're doing our testing. All of those things are on the backside of this project. So have you put that into the scenario of added costs when you think about what our team will be not doing anymore? As far as the savings?
I have. And I know that you'd ask a question, I think at one point by email about, well, I'm going to back up a step or two because I think it's worthy of discussion here that, well, should we be saving any money now because there's things that we pulled out, functions that we pulled out on the county side? Should we be saving staff costs now because we pulled out these items? And the answer to that was no. They're going to be working just as hard, slightly different combination of people working just as hard to try to get done what we need to get done because it takes that kind of effort to get it done.
Right.
I would like to jump ahead for just a minute to answer your question about, well, where will we, again, these are estimates. We may be able to do better than that. For example, on slide 26, if I can skip forward. I'll just go there for a minute. So in analyzing what might be possible with costs just based on some rate reductions, if nothing else, by negotiating things, the range of, that 790,000 could fall into a range of $422,000 to $520,000. Again, estimates where we may be able to save some money going in. I purposely was conservative about county staff costs. We have on page 24. On page 24, we have what we think are a pretty good estimate of what it would take from a county staff perspective. Again, part of this is I don't want to be misleading in any way. I try to be very conservative about the number of county staff that we have, that we may want to put in place. I think the staff that we need to support this long term is what we're trying to build up for you. You don't see, for example, a mainsail contract in here at all, because the assumption, our operating assumption here, is that if I look, I'm skipping around on slides here. If looking at slide 25 here. Summary of staff here, it's significant that we want to do this all with internal county staff, or as much as possible with internal county staff. So we're trying to minimize the consulting side, maximize the county staff that it's going to take to do this, to lay the groundwork for what the county needs to do long-term with its own staff, not contractors. And so those are all factors that went into the analysis. Are we done with these costs? No. But these are my best estimates to try to address the questions that everyone's had up to this point.
So, if I may, Chair, so the efficiencies and the reasons why we decided to have an ERP system in order for us to be in the century, it looks, are you saying that it's going to cost us more to be in payroll and staff and resources than it was before we entered into the ERP?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying to get this implementation done, you're going to need these staff members. So there's a whole internal discussion, for example, in IT about repurposing people's jobs as systems go away, bringing them into changing their jobs so that they're now supporting ERP as opposed to, say, for example, supporting an old mainframe system like Famous or the old payroll system. So it's a matter of shifting. The reason these things are shown here as ERP costs, so I could probably make the case that these could be operational costs. I mean, I could probably, that's not my call. That's OBM's call as to how they want to classify these things. Since these particular estimates are related to the implementation of these last pieces, as well as putting staff on board or shifting staff, if that's the case, to support these things, they're reflected here as ERP budget costs. The reality is, you could argue that some of these things ought to be more operational. I didn't try to go there at this point for estimating purposes. What I'm trying to do from a project management standpoint is look at this and say, okay, if we're going to implement these things with maybe relatively inexperienced people in some cases, it may take them a little more effort, a little more time, because this would be the first time they're doing some of these things largely on their own, okay? Then we've got to account for the ramp up for that too. So I didn't
Okay.
try to, those are all the kinds of factors that went into the model behind the numbers here, if that helps at all.
So in your chart, May 20th at 2, and then increasing August 20th, and then you see it decreasing by the end of the year. That's just ramping up and coming back down.
It's ramping up and coming back down from an ERP cost perspective,
Okay.
okay?
And what is SME staff?
Subject, excuse me, subject matter expert.
Okay.
I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Anything else? Okay.
Okay. Other questions?
So, let's talk about what the main goal is that's in front of us. That's to actually have a full implementation of the core elements so that we have an up and running ERP system on April 1st of 2020, less than 6 months from now. That's what we hope to accomplish.
Yes, sir.
And we need this change order to do it. And I think there isn't any question that we need second reading suspension, because otherwise it would be a 3-week additional delay, which even though the funding is not directly tied to the work, we need to keep the funding process going so that we have a good working relationship with our contractor. So I'm looking for a motion to move Resolution 2019-0227 to the full council on second reading suspension. Do I have a motion? Since my colleagues aren't making the motion, I'm going to make the motion. Is there a second?
Yep. Second.
Okay, so we're now up for discussion. I hear reluctance. It was everything we could manage to get a motion in a second. What do people have to say? Councilman Gallagher.
If it's the chairman's request to move it forward, I will vote for that. I will not support this on the floor.
Oh, go ahead.
Out of respect for my colleague, I'll move this along and support the moving this forward.
And I don't really have an issue with the 2.9. I think we've been talking about this for a while. We've all agreed we need to go to April 1st. We have a commitment that April 1st all core will be done. My issues are more of what happens after April, going into the end of the year, and how much more that's going to cost us, and what's not included, and what unexpected costs that we're now starting to get into with staff and beyond Infor and all. But today's number of the 2.9, we have no choice. We have to continue. I mean, we're 2 feet in and more in getting this ERP system up and running. And I think you have made a good case as to why it is we need to, unfortunately, go to April 1st to get the core done. We just need more conversation, I think, of what it's going to cost beyond that. And so for today, I will support the 2.9.
Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Councilwoman Simon, for yielding. I think if we can go 3 readings, that would be more palatable.
can you, to Mr. Ryan, can you make the case as to why we should not do 3 readings and pass it on second reading suspension?
Well, I think one of the primary things is we already have a vendor that's working at risk for all practical purposes here. And extending beyond the end of October, I think will create some significant issues for Infor at this point.
It just seems we've already, another reading doesn't seem like it would create much difference given the time that we've already spent on this. But that's where I am, so.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Say, where does third reading put us in dates?
it's an additional 3 weeks because we have one of these situations where we have a 5th week of October. So instead of passing it on October 22nd, I believe it would be November 12th.
That's the issue.
Okay, well,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
I have a comment.
okay.
If my colleague Brown is in favor of 3 readings, I support that. But at the end of the day, I think we're just frustrated, constantly bailing out, constantly trying to correct what we've witnessed as being, a project that's been deficient. I was in favor of a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 at this point, when Director Scott, I almost called him 1T, but left. Once that happened, everything unraveled and nothing was, really done effectively to replace him or to take control of the project, despite our consultant, despite the comments from this body, and it's extremely frustrating to us. And at some point, we're going to say no. And at some point, there's just, it's just going to have to be something the administration deals with because it's a pattern. And even though you've been here to correct things, it's still deficient. You can't do it all yourself. We've not had the leadership or any kind of recognition of the deficiencies that have plagued this project. And so I'm going to support my colleague who sat through most of these Thursday meetings. And for 3 readings, I don't know if that's going to delay April. I hope not. You guys have to figure that out with your contractor. And then when it comes to the floor, I'll decide how I'm going to vote, but I'll support this going out with 3 readings.
Councilman Gallagher.
Chairman, to go under 2 readings under emergency, you'd have to specify the emergency. I think they have that, we have a contractor on site doing the work and things are a little dicey. I think that portion of it is fine. And Jack, this isn't a reflection of you. I hope you understand that. My colleague said that we don't have a choice. We do. We can vote yes and we can vote no. And we've been told we don't have a choice for over a year and a half. And we've been voting yes for a year and a half because we didn't have a choice. I've reached my choice limit. So my choice is going to be no. We do have a choice. So I'll move it out under the 2 readings, and if you can get your votes to choose enough choices of people up here to move forward again, and again, not reflective of you. You're in on the back end. That's where I'm at. I am frustrated. I have been frustrated. That's where I'm at. So on this end, I think you understand that. But I think we've been told the emergency exists. So if we did 3 and Infor walked, then it's on us. I don't want anything to be on us at this point. Nothing's really been on us other than our vote of choice, and I've drawn my line in the sand on that. So that's where I'm at.
It's always an emergency with this.
Well, we're so used to emergencies up here, but I think to specify it on the record is important. And I'm taking you at your word that we have a contractor that's doing work and that these monies are necessary. again, we have to take people's words. We can only go on, that's bid us, especially in this ERP project, for over 2 years. But I think we've been professional about that, and that's where we're at. So I'm not happy about going on 2 readings of emergency, but I will put it, if that's what the chairman wishes, I will vote for that, because I think it's only fair to the vendor and fair to you, Jack, because that's what you're telling us what you need.
That is
Okay,
what
well-
I'm asking for.
My belief is that we have a choice both on whether to vote for the change order and whether to do it on 2 readings or 3 readings. I believe this matter has been thoroughly discussed, not only today, but on prior days. I think we know as much as we're going to know. I think we do have a sense of urgency. So I do support the recommendation for second reading suspension, but I'm only 1 vote out of 6 that are present. So what we're going to do is that we're going to call the roll on the motion to recommend including second reading suspension. And if the motion doesn't pass, well, then another motion can be offered that would just refer it to the full council without the recommendation for second reading suspension. The clerk will please call the roll. A vote is yes for referral with the recommendation for second reading suspension. A vote no is otherwise.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Tuma,
Reluctantly, yes.
Ms. Simon,
I'm changing my vote to yes, so it's not on us.
Mr. Gallagher, Ms. Brown,
As a courtesy to the chair, yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Baker. Motion stands.
Okay, you hear our reluctance, but
Yes, sir.
but we're with you.
Thank you so much
This is
for,
a team
listening.
effort. Okay, is there anyone have any miscellaneous business? Just one item to remind everybody that this is a long day, and the departmental budget hearings start at 1 o'clock for the departmental hearings. I did schedule this so that we would have some time to regroup before that starts. There being no further business, we are adjourned.